Thanks, Brandis. U.S. officials are warning about the possibility of Russia deploying chemical weapons in Ukraine. Officials have also warned about the use of so-called cluster and vacuum bombs, and recent news reports reveal that the Kremlin may have requested military equipment from China. Joining us to discuss all of this and more are Jeff Abramson, a senior fellow for conventional arms control and transfers at the Arms Control Association. That's a national organization aimed at promoting arms control and nuclear nonproliferation policies. And Robert Latiff, a retired U.S. Air Force Major General who now serves on the Science and Security Board of the Chicago-based Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Welcome both of you to Chicago tonight. General Latiff, I'll start with you. We've all seen the horrifying images of maternity hospitals being bombed, civilian targets. What are the types of weapons and munitions used on both sides of this conflict to date?
Well, both sides are using the standard classic weapons, tanks and rifles and bombs and missiles. But we've heard reports and seen films of the use of what you call the vacuum bomb or the thermobaric bomb, and cluster munitions, which are, as the name sound, dispense little small bomblets that then go off over a very large area. Those are considered to be sort of heinous weapons.
And Jeff Abramson, tell us more about, the Major General brought up the cluster munitions and vacuum bombs. Tell us more about how dangerous they are.
So, warfare is horrible, but what we've come to do in a lot of ways is sort of narrow it down to certain weapons that we just sort of generally agree are really particularly awful. So cluster munitions, as the Major General is talking about, are little bombs inside big bombs. And one of the problems with them is they tend not to explode immediately, but to leave around little toy-like munitions that kids and others come and pick up later. So because of such an indiscriminate weapon that is usually harming civilians, it's one that 110 countries around the world have agreed to a treaty that bans these weapons. So you look for weapons that are banned internationally when you talk about war as a sign of how horrible that war is. Thermobaric bombs are not banned per se in the same way, but their use against civilian targets is against international law. And these are also particularly dastardly weapons that are really meant to destroy things like bunkers and buildings and heavily fortified places. And when they're used in civilian areas, the suffering that is caused on the human body, if you can survive it at all, is just particularly awful. So that is why those two weapons, which we have seen Russia using in civilian areas, have been pointed out in the conflict.
And General Latiff, Jeff Abramson brings up the fact that over 100 countries have signed a treaty banning these weapons. How have they been used in warfare in the past?
Well, the thermobaric vacuum bomb was used to quite great effect in Afghanistan, and when they were hunting down the Taliban and others in the caves, and that's a perfect use for them. It's a non-populated area, but the so-called mixture will be dispersed and go inside and then explode. So it does what it needs to do. But Afghanistan was probably the latest use of them.
So used more for that, not necessarily for urban areas where it seems like they can be more deadly and target, again, civilians. Jeff Abramson, as I understand, the U.S. has not signed the treaty banning these weapons. Can you explain that?
Yeah, the United States, unfortunately, still argues that there is a need for cluster munitions. They say they will use them more against tank movements or those types of armored movements. But it's an aerial denial type weapon. The United States isn't using this weapon, hasn't used it really in any major way in 20 years, except maybe in a very limited capacity in Yemen. But unfortunately, the United States maintains that it needs to use certain weapons that it then condemns other countries for using. So this is something that I've called for the United States to finally get on board that treaty, as well as the mine ban treaty, which are two weapons the United States says it needs, but the world really has said are indiscriminate and shouldn't exist anymore.
All right, well, very recently, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, appeared before the UN, sounding the alarm about Russia possibly using chemical weapons. Take a look.
We have serious concerns that Russia may be planning to use chemical or biological agents against the Ukrainian people. Russia could use chemical or biological agents for assassinations as part of a staged or false flag incident, or to support tactical military operations.
General Latif, do you share the ambassador's concerns here that the use of these kind of weapons for things like assassinations could be imminent?
Only partially. I'm sure the ambassador has access to intelligence, which obviously I don't have. But I kind of agree that chemicals, perhaps, biological weapons, I would have to doubt that. Those once released are not very easily controlled. Chemicals more so. And in the past, the Russians have not shown any hesitation to use chemicals against individuals. So it's possible, not probable.
Jeff Abramson, what about concerns over the use of nuclear weapons? Obviously, there's a camp of folks that say it's a bluff. Other camp of folks say you can never really be too careful or prepared or cautious when dealing with nuclear powers. What do you think?
I think a lot of us have tried to get into the mind of Vladimir Putin, and a lot of us are failing to do so. So I don't think you would rule it out completely. I do think that the situation is trying to be controlled in a way that we don't get to that sort of escalation. I think the real scenario where you might see a nuclear exchange is if you started to see direct military conflict between U.S. or NATO forces and Russia that ratchets it up to a nuclear exchange. But I'm hopeful that the Putin does not want to move down that path. I hope it's bluster, but it's another sign that nuclear weapons are not actually making the world any safer. They are being used in this case to enable the conflict. But we're hoping that path is not taken. It does seem that the Biden administration is being very cautious to not ratchet up nuclear alerts, to also make sure that there is a way to get in touch with Russia directly so that any sort of escalation or misunderstanding is taken into heart. But anytime you start talking nuclear, this is ratcheting up the concerns.
And General Latif, as we mentioned, there are reports that the U.S. officials are concerned about China possibly assisting Russia with weapons. Do these kinds of alliances, could they escalate into a global conflict, again, with nuclear powers in play here?
I don't think so. I think the worry with China, at least the most current worry, has been that they might be providing weapons. We don't know whether they're defensive weapons or offensive weapons or aid for that matter. And I think it's highly unlikely that we would ever proceed to having Russians or Chinese involved in combat operations against the United States or NATO.
All right, well, a lot to watch here, and we thank you for your expertise. Our thanks to Jeff Abramson and General Robert Latif. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.